everybody, what's going on? Back with a new video. We are diving into an actual true crime novel in this video. We are going to be discussing today The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. Now, like I mentioned, this is a true crime novel, so the facts and all the stuff that is in this book is based on true events. Before I started to read this book, again, I read the synopsis of it. It really was enticing to me. A lot of the stuff that is in this book is something that I've never really realized. A lot of the occurrences, the themes, and inventions that happen within this story are really enticing. They're really interesting. And again, once I dive in and discuss a little bit of the details, not too much, because I don't want to spoil it for you, you're going to realize that you might actually want to check this book out if you haven't. We are going to be focusing on two types of people actually in this book. Now, diving right into this book, we are going to be discussing the World's Columbian Exposition that happened in 1893. Now, when we dive into this, we're going to realize the details of what happened to make this occur, and we're going to realize the famous people and the inventions and all that good stuff that's going to happen. Breaking down into the middle of this, we're focusing on one half of the story, and then the other half we are focusing on another character. The first person we are focusing on in this story is a gentleman named Daniel H. Burnham. Burnham is the lead architect and the director of works that goes into the exposition. He is the in charge, he is the head honcho of this, and a lot of things go through him. So he goes through, he hires architects, he goes through a really vigorous kind of process with all this, because this is going to go in 1893, so we're going back a few years, maybe 1890, 1889, where he is focusing on, okay, we need to have this big old fair, we need to focusing on where we're going to actually do it, which they end up having it in Chicago, the Windy City, which is very funny because in this book they get credit to the person who actually came up with the name the Windy City. Before they even decide to have the exposition in Chicago, Burnham is going through a lot of steps to get this in running. Again, he is finding numerous architects around the world going for the right amount of stuff, because each different building in the exposition was different. There was an electrical building. There was a building actually designed by a woman architect and his crew, so it was really awesome to see. I don't want to give you, again, all the details. I really want you to read it to find out all the really awesome stuff that has happened in this book. So as Burnham's trying to figure out his stuff with the expo before he can even find a place for it, we go to a different part of the story, which is the personal part of me where I really like to enjoy this part. We go to a childhood kind of flashback memory of a kid named Herman Webster Mudgett. Now, as the book discusses Mudgett for a brief second, it's his childhood. As a child, he gets bullied a lot. So again, he doesn't have the best childhood. His family, again, it's an all right family. It's not the best, but again, his family, I think, are both Methodists. I could be wrong on that, just the top of my head. When Mudgett grows up, he goes into medical school, so he wants to become a doctor. So he's going through all that process of going through, the testing, the classes, all the fun stuff that doctors have to deal with. Again, he gets really involved with it. He gets really thrilled with it, especially dead bodies. So going with that, I don't want to give too much away on it, but again, in 1890, he's a grown man now. So as the young doctor steps off a train in 1890 in Chicago, now this is actually going to be happening before he steps off the train. He changed his name from Herman Mudgett to famously known as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, or which a lot of people know by H.H. Holmes, the most notorious and famous serial killer in the United States during the 19th century. So before we even get into the serial killing and the murders and all the mystery, and again, obviously leading to Holmes' execution, which he was executed in 1895, if I'm not mistaken, we go and dive into who he becomes as this serial killer. So like I mentioned, when Burnham is working on the expo and trying to get all the architects and all the stuff ready for it, when it goes in 1893, again, this is a few years before, so we're in 1890. So funny enough, back in the late 19th century, when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created his famous detective that we all know and love, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Holmes was actually influenced by him to change his name to that. So that was a little side note. As Holmes is living in Chicago, Holmes actually swindles and kind of cons a grocery store owner to have them buy the deed from him. The store owner's husband is dying, he's sick, he's ill, and she's having too much trouble running the store and stuff. So Holmes, he comes up as a very nice gentleman. So Holmes is known to be a very manipulative con artist, very handsome. He's got a nice big old mustache. He is using his looks and his very quick-witted mind to get what he wants. Now fast forwarding here, as he owns the store, again, he is changing the store. He is actually, again, meeting new people. He's had kids in the past. He's meeting women. He's very seductive. Women come up to him when he's in the store. When he has a clerk or someone else working or something, no one wants to go to him. They just want to go to Mr. Holmes and get help from him. They are swindled. It's something about him that just is manipulating everyone around him. So as he uses that to his advantage, so while Burnham is working on the architect and Holmes is running his store, the two kind of events collide in some way or another. Now the two characters do not collide. Holmes hears about obviously the whole expo that's going to be happening, or the process that's going to happen. So he's kind of getting an idea. Burnham gets his crew together. together. They start building this event that's going to take place in 1893. Now there's a lot of stuff that's happening. You know, buildings aren't maintained. You know, they're kind of sinking in the soil. People are actually dying from not only diseases, people are getting electrocuted. So they find the location. They know that it's going to be in Chicago. They know that when it's going to happen, the whole expo. So they are working hard, you know, getting the architectural structures ready. So everything has to be agreed with deeds, you know, location, all that stuff. So when that happens, Holmes figures out, okay, so Holmes is in a great spot for it. So the location of the store or the building he starts to actually manufacture is actually on 63rd Street, which would be right down the road, I believe, not too far from where the expo would be taking place. Holmes starts diving up these psychotic and ridiculous ideas of how he wants to build, which is known today as his murder castle. So Holmes is using his wit and his con artist skills to get what he wants. So he's trying to get architects, carpenters to help with him and all that stuff. By the way, speaking of carpenters, so we go back to the architectural side of this where they're building the expo. So when they were diving into the carpentry and finding the right carpenters to help with the World Expo, one carpenter comes right to mind with me. When I read this, I saw the last name. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. A famous carpenter by the name of Keppel Elias Disney is actually on the crew for this World Expo. So as we know, the last name Disney, this is Walt Disney's father, who is actually part of the World Expo and creating it. So I thought that was really fascinating. Eric Larson goes over how Walt Disney was very influenced by the structure of the World Expo to make his beautiful Walt Disney World and Walt Disneyland. So I thought that was amazing. A big Disney fan. I have a lot of Disney fans out there. So that was really cool just to find this in a true crime novel. I love it. Anyways, back to where we were. We're talking about Holmes and his castle, his murder castle or castle of murder, whatever you want to call it. So he finds the right people to put the pieces in with all this structure. Some people, they may be like, they might be asking questions in the back of their head, but they're like, hey, I'm getting paid, so why bother? Again, he's manipulating the banks, the financial institutions of getting loans. And again, he's like, hey, you need to pay this on time, blah, blah, blah. He is such the craziest con artist I've ever read about. And so when he does this and he gets his castle all up and running, a lot of gruesome stuff starts to take place. People are missing, especially women in particular start to come up missing. Children are missing as well, which it gets really gruesome and really kind of disturbing at the very end. And again, if you really want to find out the truth of how sadistic this serial killer was, Holmes was one of a kind, and again, he was nothing like the detective Sherlock Holmes. So really interesting novel. I give this a 5-star. I love reading true crime, and again, there's more I want to fill in about this story. You have the whole World Expo that's coming into Chicago, and then you also have the most sadistic and notorious serial killer in the United States, and it all started with Mr. H.H. Holmes. Before I sound off, everyone, I want to mention in this book also, so a lot of famous people were there. Like I mentioned, like Disney's father was a carpenter there. Nikola Tesla, he worked on the electrical building that was actually in the expo. And also Thomas Edison was there as well. So a lot of cool, interesting people put into the story. Larson did an amazing job putting all this together, getting all the facts. He did so much work and research on putting this book together, and I thought it was a really great job, really well written. And again, I always listen to Audible, so it was really good with the narrator as well. Last thing I want to mention are the inventions at the World Expo that actually lured people into this expo. A lot of people, and like tons of people, like millions of people showed up to this expo, which was ridiculous. This exposition, the World Columbian Exposition, whatever you want to call it, was phenomenal, had such great success. There's a lot of work put into it, but inventions such as dishwasher were shown there, zippers, the Cracker Jacks, and then also some alcohol known as Pabst Blue Ribbon, which personally, I don't drink any beer, can't stand the stuff. So having all the inventions of that stuff there used there, and then also people known to today loving Cracker Jacks. Not a big fan of Cracker Jacks, so leave in the comments if you love Cracker Jacks, if you love zippers, if you love dishwashers. Yeah, dishwashers and like certain electrical appliances were shown there, which was really good. It was a big hit back in the 19th century, so a lot of this. Again, I know I'm babbling, and this was a lot to talk about, but I loved it. And lastly, so it was this person, an inventor of who actually, I don't think it was the actual inventor of Braille, it might have been, but this person who invented the Braille system, for those people obviously don't know, the Braille is helpful to people who are blind, helps them with reading, all that amazing stuff that people have done. This person, an inventor, was very fortunate to shake hands and hug with the famous Helen Keller. And it was just amazing to read that part. I think that part is actually near the end of the book. But amazing story. Again, I don't know who the actual person was off the top of my head, but like the amount of people that actually showed up at this expo and then all the famous people we know about today is something that I wasn't going to expect while reading this book. I highly recommend reading this book if you love true crime. Comment in the comment below if you have any true crime recommendations. That for me, I love true crime. Again, this was a great one. So I'm a huge reader of serial killers. Again, Jack the Ripper, one of my all-time favorite persons to read about. So messed up and so much. And people might think that I messed up. Well, that's their opinion. That's fine by me. But again, all this stuff about true crime in this book, The Devil in the White City, hands down, one of the best true crime novels I have read recently. So go check it out. I need some water. Please read your book cover to cover. We'll see y'all later.